Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue to watch this TV show called Welcome to Plathville, and I'm going to react to it as I watch.
Joshua is our son that was born in 2007, and we had an accident in 2008. He was killed. He was 17 months old.
Okay, interesting. So we heard about that last season, and it's just such a tragedy and just so sad. Obviously for Joshua, the child, but for the family and the mom to have accidentally done something that led to the death of your child, just heart-wrenching to hear about. And I'm just so sorry for the family. But we just learned a little bit more detail. I thought, given the way that they were telling this story, that Joshua, the child who had deceased, that it happened recently and that that child might have been the youngest child. But now we're amending my family tree here, and it looks like that Joshua was Isaac's younger brother, so just the right after Isaac. And so that means that when the mother was going through such a difficult time, all the kids were pretty young. So when that happened, because she talked about how it was really hard for her and she basically just checked out for a year. And so Isaac would have been 1, Lydia would have been 3-ish, and Mariah would have been 4. And so when you have a situation like that where a parent is in a deep depression, going through a lot of grief, I don't know about depression precisely, but it sounds like that's what she's talking about, at least a lot of emotional turmoil, then it's not unusual to imagine a parent not having the full capacity to love and care for your children. And that can have profound effects on the development of the children. We tend to look at childhood abuse and neglect as something that is done from the parents. They are upset and they're angry. But abuse and neglect, particularly neglect, emotional neglect, can be caused by a variety of things. If your family is going through refugee status, or your family is suffering from poverty, or the parents suffered a loss like this, or one of the parents is depressed, or a variety of things that we would feel sorry for the parents. But that can lead to compromised parents who can't give their kids enough love and attention, and then we might see results from that. So it's possible that during that time, Hosanna and maybe even Lydia, even though she was only 3 or so, and maybe Ethan as well, decided that, what they were going to do was they were going to become responsible and they were going to be good kids. But then Micah and Mariah in particular, they decided we're not going to be the good kids, that we don't like what's happening right here. We feel like we're being neglected. Now, what's possible here is that all the children had to face that difficulty along with the mother, that they're going to the mom for love and attention, but for that year and maybe even longer, they don't have access to her. It wouldn't be uncommon to hear about someone in her position who has a hard time getting out of bed. I've worked with families who have that sort of situation where for a period of time, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, a parent was so depressed that they couldn't even get out of bed during the day, and the kids are just playing by themselves and would knock on the door and say, "Hey, mommy, daddy, are you okay?" And the parents would say, "Oh, I'm tired, just watch TV or something." And at the time, it might look like it's not a problem because the kids don't seem to have any symptoms, but that gets the kids. They start learning, I can't depend on my parents. I'm not lovable enough. That's another conclusion that they will have. And I wonder for Mariah in particular, she would have been about 3 at the time, 4 maybe. And I wonder if for her, she concluded, I'm not good enough. My mom isn't giving me love and attention, and I don't know why. And it must be because I'm not good enough. And screw it. I'm just going to act like I'm not good enough. I wonder about that. I wonder about all the kids. So that really adds some more detail to what could have affected the development of the kids and the eventual anger that the kids might feel towards the parents, particularly the mom.
I was moving our vehicle and I saw him over there He was okay. I got in and I drove. And in that short amount of time, he had darted towards the vehicle and I ran over him. And if there is one moment in my whole life I could live over and redo, that is it.
Yeah, it's just such a tragedy. And I just cannot imagine what the family went through, and particularly the mom. I just cannot imagine that.
I think for those of us that knew Joshua and that lived through that, it was really hard. And for the little girls, they don't have any anger about it or any guilt about it. I mean, they're totally removed from it because
I guess there's another situation, as the mom is talking about it, that occurs to me, is the other children would have also experienced the loss, obviously, that their younger brother would have died. And so it's possible that the children are not, it's not just possible, it's highly likely that everyone in the family suffered from that loss and that grief. And I wonder, actually, it just occurs to me, if some of the kids secretly, particularly Mariah maybe, developed some kind of anger at the mom for having caused the accident. That's interesting. I could see that happening, actually. I've treated families with events like this before, where when we really dig down deep, we find that for the Mariahs in the family, where their anger really began was during that year where you were cut off from me and you were quiet and you were subdued, and I also was very angry at you for getting in that car and not checking to make sure that Joshua was okay. That showed me that you didn't really care about us, because if it wasn't Joshua, it could have been one of us. Do you not care about your children? Now, from the mom's point of view, she might be like, oh my God, I totally care about my kids. It was totally a freak accident, and I did everything I could to, provide safety, and it didn't work. I don't know the circumstances. But I wonder if Mariah, at the age of 5 or however old she was at the time, that's the conclusion that she came to. It wouldn't be strange for a 5-year-old to come to that conclusion. 5-year-olds come to some very weird conclusions in our eyes, given their limited understanding of how the world works. So it's possible that would have happened, and then that changes over time and morphs into just a general hostility and pushback on the mom. It's interesting to think about, right? And as a therapist, the reason why I would want to know this sort of stuff is because I would want to know what traumas I would need to really target to heal, help the family heal from. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of healing left naturally from this loss and this tragedy. But I wonder if healing from this one would partially dissipate some of the difficulties between her and Mariah. It's a question mark. It's interesting to think about. At the very least, I wonder if the mom and Mariah could bond. I mean, that's another thing I would often think about as a therapist, of just like, okay, here's an hypothesis. Everything stems from that one loss. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. And maybe I should dive into that trauma some more and really help them heal from that. There's probably some healing left to be done. And let's say at the end of that, there's a good outcome where Mariah and the mom love each other more, they have less conflict, there's more understanding, more flexibility. At the end of that process, I would say, well, my original hypothesis must have been right, that the cause of this whole thing was that loss of Joshua. Well, another possibility is that we just decided that was the main problem in the family as a collective, and we all decided that and chose to do this bonding activity and this vulnerability activity between them to help cure a variety of things, one of which would have been the tragedy. But by working on this one thing, we actually, by proxy, healed from a lot of different things. Anyway, maybe she'll say more about it.
because they were all born afterwards.
Mommy, how old would Joshua be?
He would be 13 right now.
Yeah.
You girls right now would have 2 big brothers living at home picking on you. We talked about it with
Right. So according to that math, Moriah would have been 5, Lydia would have been 4, and Isaac would have been 2 at the time of the death. So Lydia and Moriah, I'm guessing, would have experienced a lot of the difficulty, because at that age, when you're 4 and 5, you need a lot of contact with your mom. Obviously, for Isaac being 2, but Isaac might have been able to, I could see a scenario where the mom had just enough love to give to a 2-year-old, but not enough in the moment, energy-wise, to give to Lydia and Moriah. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up here. Who knows? But it would be something that I would investigate if I were treating the family.
With the older children way back, and, we probably talked about it more, later on, like a year later. We haven't really talked about it much since. It's hard for me to think about the older children and the hurt that caused them. It's possible that trauma has affected our relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. So she's bringing this up, which leads me to believe that they're going to go down this road and maybe talk about it with everyone in the family. That's interesting. I thought this would just be a kind of a one-off conversation, but I don't know, you kind of get used to the rhythm of these shows and the way they edit them, and I wonder if this is a setup for later. If it is, fantastic. I'd love to see the family talk about this. I think they could actually do a lot of good healing around that.
I guess it's doubly hard, because as much as I hate that Joshua died, that much more I hate that it caused any of my other children pain.
Yeah. And so we might look at this family, or you might look at this family and go, oh, the mom, she's so rigid and she's so weird, and what's wrong with her? And then when, just say, for instance, we target this trauma and this grief, and collectively as a family, they heal and rework how the family operates, and everyone's relatively happy at the end. Well, then what are we looking at? Are we looking at evil mom, or are we looking at a pretty good family that suffered a massive tragedy, and that tragedy caused the family to go off kilter a little bit and produce things that we're seeing on this TV show, in terms of some of the older kids being really upset at the parents? That can absolutely happen. That's how systems theory explains things, is that when things get a little off kilter, then it compounds, more distance, more hurt. And it all began from a very difficult situation that wasn't anyone's fault. And everyone reacted in different ways, and they didn't fully recover. Or another way of saying it, it took 15 years to recover from the difficulty, and the whole family went through a whole series of things. So maybe we'll get to see, I really hope we get to see conversations around that, but for some reason, I just don't see that happening on this show. These reality TV shows, they almost never go into the things that I wish they would. But anyway. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.